Yeah, that would have been the wrong button. Okay, Obsidian update. Properties. Do we call them properties now, or are they still metadata because it's not fully released?
I don't know. They're cool. They look cool.
They do look cool. I must admit, the only thing that I'm really using about the update is the fact that I don't have to show them inside the file.
Yeah.
Everything else I'm still using metadata menu for. That's really the only difference because the whole date checkbox stuff it doesn't impact me because I use metadata menu.
Mm. I think it's more. I think it's going to be more exciting for newer users
Mm,
than power users because for me, metadata menu is still going to work better because I just do it from wherever I want to, wherever I am, versus having to go into the file, press the buttons, open it up. It looks nice. The property function looks nice, and it's so much flipping better than the YAML. It looks better than the YAML, less confusing, less things to break, and I can just paste stuff in. For my D&D games, it's kind of cool because I can just put the summary in the top, and I don't have to make sure that everything's perfectly formatted. And
yeah,
it's annoying.
less of
But
a friction point when actually adding information into properties.
mm.
The
But apart from that, it's so nice. I think it looks good. I think for new people who are just like, oh, I wish this and I wish that, and it's really interesting seeing the like social response to it of like, oh, they should they're now copying Tana and they should do what Tana's at. And I'm like, shut up, fool. No, they're not. They already had this. Just because you couldn't see it.
that's the thing that I think is interesting. The properties to me, it is really is a facelift. The main functionality, yes, you can hide them. You could have done that with a plugin anyway. You could put them in the
Yeah.
sidebar. Yes, you could have done that with a plugin anyway. You can have auto suggestions now, which you could do that with a plugin anyway. So
Yeah.
what they've done is they've brought community plugin features to core, which
Mm.
yes is really nice for new users. Yes, is really good for like other people seeing it. But as you say, if you're familiar with Obsidian, you could already do this stuff.
Yeah.
But I completely support them bringing it to core.
I'm so glad they're bringing it to core. I'm.
Mm.
It was. It's also a really good implementation of it. I think it's a
Yeah.
really good. Like what they've done. They've done it properly. They've done it well. They haven't just shoved it in there really half-assed and gone, "Oh, I'm going to throw this out because everyone wants it." No, they took the time and did it slowly, which is more to say for most other apps out there.
hmm I feel like this also, I don't know whether you've seen Capano tweet, but he's also look, looked at sort of like connecting the properties with API calls and other things. And it looks more like a typical productivity app that we see now, rather than the code heavy sort of visual editor that we are used to seeing. But it
It's
still
quite
has that.
exciting seeing that, like getting more. This right now gets me excited for recommending it to other business owners because they would be familiar enough with Notion, but they don't like Notion because it's too limiting,
Mm.
or because they want actual offline mode. Um, and that right there, like just being able to see that at the top, so it's Notion like.
Yeah.
Because Notion's UI has always been its strong. In my opinion, it's been one of its strongest features. The UI of Notion is fantastic.
hmm
The naming conventions are awful, but like the actual UI is super clean, super simple, and just gets out of your way, which I've always appreciated. And this is a step in the right direction for Obsidian to make their UI more beginner friendly and less
Yeah.
code heavy, because it is seriously has been code heavy for quite a while. Whereas this is a step in the like, oh, let's make it more visually appealing so visual people, visual learners,
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. You had to go with the VARC. Yeah. Moving on.
of course it is. Purpose, just for you. Um, to be able to start using this tool and be like, oh, it's not cody, it's not scary, it's like oh
Mm.
easy, and that's quite exciting from like a business standpoint and the people that I work with. It brings Obsidian very close to being alongside Notion for people who need utter freedom
I think yes for personal use. For collaborative
Mm.
use, Obsidian still struggles.
Yeah, collaborative is still a way. Yeah, but does it?
Yes.
Because we're not
Wait,
having any problems.
no, we're not. But when you compare Google Docs with
That's
Obsidian,
true. Yeah, that's true.
what would you pick as
Google
like
Docs.
exactly?
I would still pick Google Docs. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So when it comes to collaborative note taking, Docs still wins. But when it comes to what I would class as intellectual individuals, people that are thinking, people that are writing, probably creators or individual creators that are working with ideas, Obsidian for me is far more flexible and extensible in the ways that you can use it. I had a conversation with James, which will go out at some point in the future, and his main critique of Obsidian, or main critiques of Obsidian, were its look. And I think with the ability to add themes was great, but there was still the YAML front matter stuff. And I think that was his biggest, doesn't look nice. Whereas
Yeah,
this update solves
it does.
that.
It means it's less codey and more pretty.
Exactly. And then the other thing, the other big critique he had was collaborative use. And that's where I don't think Obsidian excels. Obsidian excels in personal intellectual pursuits, which is what I would class researchers as. And this is something that James will probably come back to once he's finished editing this video. When it gets back to the research stage, is research collaborative? Is research individualized and then becomes collaborative in the writing process? What does that look like? That's a conversation for each individual team and individual themselves to work through.
Yeah, yeah. I'm quite excited. I must admit, like it's cool. The potential for it. I don't use it because metadata menu
Yeah.
does what I need to, and it works for what I want. But
I think with a bit of tinkering and tweaking, the ability to link inside of the property is the biggest functional feature that they've added that could be useful. And I've toyed with this a little bit, and I think the developer of metadata menu will probably play with the syntax a little bit. But at the moment, with metadata menu, when you add a link inside of a canvas, so for example, one card goes to another card via an arrow, a directional arrow, a link is added inside of the property front matter with brackets. So it's linked to that file, but you can't click it because it's in the front matter. And
yeah,
because of the way metadata menu currently works, it's not a clickable link. But the
no,
syntax for metadata menu is it adds it as a list item, and then has 3 square brackets because it's an array with a link in it. If it changes the syntax to match the text property syntax that Obsidian has, it then becomes a clickable link.
yeah,
Then we have links, like actual links inside of properties of files that you can create inside of a canvas. That function, that feature, I think, is very high with its potential. It's got a big potential moving forwards, especially for
yeah.
those like me that use the canvas a lot for overviews and brainstorming different
I was just
ideas.
thinking that being able to link to at the moment it's just you put it up at the top and then you're done. But if you could have a property where it creates that and it puts it in the top, it's all nice. Oh, that'd be lovely. I would love that.
Yeah, for those curious to see some implementations, I think it's the third and fourth of the top 5 Canvas dashboard use cases that I have would be most impacted by that functionality, that feature. But because of the way that they've done the properties, there is a lot of potential opportunities moving forwards as well to look at other properties like relation properties, roll
Yeah.
up properties, because
It's secret.
we already
Yeah,
have the
go
relation property. It's just unidirectional. It's a link.
on.
Bidirectional relation properties is something that other plugins have done. They can do it. It's just how that impacts the core speed and functionality will be what the developers are looking at.
True. I this feels like the start.
It feels like
It just
version 2, the start of
yeah,
version 2.
yes. Yeah. I
Because
hope it doesn't change too much.
Well, it won't. I mean, when you actually look at the properties, it hasn't changed a thing apart from what it looks like, and the functionality of the linking
True.
is really the only thing that's changed, because it's still at its core, a markdown editor with stuff on top, which is why it's so freaking fast.
Yeah. So good.
It's so good. It's so nice. I think the only thing I'd add on as well to this as a conversation is I'm curious to hear what your hotkeys are. So I hide, this is my preference, I hide the properties from the file. And when I want to look at them, I push Control Shift P, because Control P is command palette, and it brings it up in the sidebar. But when I want to edit the properties, I push on the icon at the top of the tab for metadata menu.
Yeah, so I haven't hidden it yet. I've not had much time to do proper play, but I don't hide it because it's just there. I know I can, but I just
I have
haven't.
found it so odd looking at my file without fields up there, your properties up there.
Yeah.
It's really because I want to, when I previously wanted to change a status or change an idea, or add something inside of the property, I would just like mash my scroll wheel all the way up, click and change. But now I
Yeah.
don't need to do that. I Control P, move my mouse over, and then can change. And there's small actionable differences, but because my behavior is so used to scrolling, sometimes I mash a scroll. I'm like, where's the? Oh yeah. So it's going to have to be something I get used to. But it
Yeah,
is
I
nice
have
to.
them showing for now. I have them showing for now.
Yeah, it is nice to just be able to see at the top of my file exactly what the file's meant to say, like the writing of the file.
So good. I'm really excited for seeing what it does next.
I guess to segue this a little bit, I think properties increases Obsidian's social credibility inside of the app space.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I
oh,
know,
oh, 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 smooth.
I know,
That's
right?
smooth, smooth, super smooth. It does. It does. Absolutely. It does.
Because what a lot of people like capacities, Tana, SmartNotes, Scrintool, Notion, they all what?
So I was just laughing how BS that was and how actually quite beautiful it was at the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
time.
It
Yeah,
it
they
it
they have.
emerged. It emerged through the
Yeah.
conversation, but they all have this. Oh, it looks really nice. And what's the new one that came out? Any type with its objects. They all
Yeah.
look basically the same. And Obsidian was
Yeah.
always different. Obsidian was always this
Yeah.
code programmer person thing. Well, now when it's fully released anyway, it looks the same. So the
Mm,
affordances that people perceive with that
yeah.
function feature is the same. Instead of looking
Yeah.
at it as text with colons and like, can I add a square bracket or a comma? Like they need to know syntax. No, now it's just type stuff.
Yeah. That's gonna be really exciting. Like and it will, because all the other tools have, like Tana and Notion, are people who talk about it an awful lot. Obsidian has their users that talk about it, but they're quite on a
I,
high level of nerdy, like.
I would say the people that use Obsidian are the actual productive people because they actually do stuff. Like
Yeah.
when you actually look at the people that use Obsidian, I'm not talking about the creators that use Obsidian. I'm talking about the people, the actual community themselves. They are writers, they are authors, they are academics. Academics don't have the time to make videos, don't have the time to sit on Twitter and post about canvases and stuff like me.
Yeah.
They are actually in the research, they're doing the writing. Writers, the same, they're writing novels, they're writing thousands of words a day. Other creators like CGP Grey that I've spoken about before, he is constantly in Obsidian writing and
Yeah.
intellectually working with ideas. They're not
Yeah.
talking about the app. The app isn't the thing,
Yeah.
which it's the result. It's what they're actually doing with the app that matters. Now, I've previously had a symbiotic relationship, as it were, with Obsidian because I could talk about how I use Obsidian because I'm
Mm,
in it all the time, and
yeah.
Obsidian was my output. And if people wanted to see it, they could see it. Now that my output is Substack, talking about Obsidian is actually becoming harder because I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, that was my experience when I had Notion, and when Notion was the primary thing that I did. As I was actually doing more things outside of it and working on different things and doing more like actual work rather than just making pretty things. Um, and I go back to what Layla said in our Notion v ClickUp thing ages ago.
Look up the
That's
Obsidian. Actually,
it.
is it Smart Suite now with Layla?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I know she did a little bit of a pivot in her conversations. Anyway, that's a big side tangent there.
Yeah. And I started to just not talk about Notion because I didn't have anything exciting to say, or anything really to say because I was doing stuff. And I think, yeah,
Some people may make this connection to another conversation that we've had, but I feel like the users of Obsidian follow philosophy, follow psychology, follow learning science. So they're not trying to think about other things. They are thinking about other things. They just happen to be using a tool to do it.
the
And
tool
when
is the tool is in the background. It's not the forefront. Whereas with Notion, because of how Notion is, it has to be because you are constrained far more with Notion than you are with Obsidian. You have that massive Obsidian just I just come in here, create a canvas file or create a document and I'm off. Like being able, so I've been out a lot this week as I've been running D&D for a local group, for a local place. And it has been so nice to just be able to sit down in the local pub and just open up Obsidian, not have to think about how to use it, and just get in there, get my stuff down, get my stuff ready, get my stuff out, and go and run D&D. Like it's just been heavenly. And then during the time of like getting stuff set up for D&D, I wanted a visual way of representing it, and I just needed to do it quickly. And of course, I knew Notion, so I tried to go back to Notion. But then I realized the moment I leave my house, I can't access anything in flipping Notion. And unfortunately, it's quicker to, well, I feel it's quicker to do visual things in Notion because I don't have the
expertise.
affordances and the expertise to make it look pretty quickly in Obsidian. But even I went, hang on a minute, it can do export as PDF and the PDF looks better. Why
I'm
am I doing
curious,
this in Notion?
what would you do in Notion that you can't do in Obsidian as easily?
It's the columns are quicker in Notion. That's primarily it. Everything else is fine. It's more creating columns. That's probably the thing that's quickest in Notion versus Obsidian. Without, and I didn't even look for plugins. I probably could find a plugin that would work, but
So what are you actually doing when you're
it
trying to illustrate things?
yeah. So it was basically I was creating like class and character quick start guides. So you have a class, and it's just like here's some information. I wanted it to look attractive because they were primarily younger audiences. So that on the left there was the character art, and then on the right there was some text, and it was more of a visual representation that I knew how to do. But in hindsight, as I'm thinking about it, I could have made it in Obsidian all the same. I just didn't have the
Hmm.
expertise to
Yeah, no, that's
do it
fine.
quite so quickly.
Yeah, I feel like this conversation also exposes uh, vanity metrics. I brought up vanity metrics as a note, and I think it applies to one, people, but two, tools. And I think we can sort of like diverge the conversation a little bit with this point, because when you think about those that use Obsidian,
Mm.
the way that you grab attention from a lot of people is not by talking about what you're researching, because a lot of the time what you're
Just by talking
researching
about the bloody fucking tool.
exactly, because a lot of the time what you're researching is only interesting to a couple of people, like a handful of people,
Yeah.
unless you have an audience already that's interested in that field, which most people don't. So how do you gain
Yeah.
an audience? If you want to gain an audience, Well, you need vanity metrics, which are the views, the likes, the shares, the retweets, etc. If you're on Twitter, or re-X's, whatever they're going to call them. Yeah, exactly. X and Twitter, forget that conversation. But yeah, and then when you're looking at YouTube, again, the same sorts of things. If I've tried this and it didn't work. If I try talking about my research, I get no views because people aren't interested in it. They're not interested in the research. They're interested in the behaviors and the why do I care? But the why do I care bit requires an essay, requires an article, requires more than one piece of research. So talking about growing an audience requires something to get some vanity metrics from, which is the tool. So people talk about the tool. And when you look at Notion, people talked about Notion itself, grow their audience, and then they talk about whatever else it is. And that's essentially what study YouTubers did. Study YouTubers, they talked about how they studied, but how did most of them grow? When you look at the videos that got the views, Notion. They got their views from Notion. They then gained an audience for people that were interested in how they study, and then they carried on. As Notion started to fade out, so did their views, funnily enough. Whether that's causation or correlation, I don't know, but certainly telling. And when you look at a lot of the big study YouTubers, if they didn't pivot their content, i.e. Ali pivoted to business, or they didn't pivot their content into something that's more valuable, i.e. this is how to learn, this is science behind stuff, this is educational content, and they just followed the vlog thing, the views dropped. And when you look at most of the study channels now on YouTube, the vanity metrics, as they were, have drastically dropped. Their views are lower, their watch retention's lower, the click-through rate's lower, because they don't have Notion to talk about, because it's no longer this big thing, and the value, perceived value, has dropped.
Yeah.
So the tool has became the thing to talk about, and Obsidian isn't like a big tool for people to talk about. So how do you gain vanity
And
metrics?
it's not very visually interesting.
No. So how do you gain vanity
Notion
metrics?
and Anytype and Tana. Tana's hideous anyway. I can't stand how Tana looks. But like, that's beside the point. I
It's
hate
subjective.
Outline. Yeah, it is. And it just, yeah. I mean, it's why I never. One of the things I would love to make videos, but I want to make videos on things that I want to make, but then they won't give you. That's just what's the point.
That's why I started the second channel though.
Yeah, that was the point. I just don't care. Like I have a limited. I have a very constrained time, and yeah, I can make videos, but am I making them for me? Possibly, but that's not enough. That for me, that's not enough, because I might as well spend time with my kids for 4 or 5 hours, or bring in some income from some work versus trying to create the content and do that. There are other ways I can.
That comes down to your pop, your philosophy of practice. Yeah, your pop. When it comes to creating content, but
yeah.
when I'm looking at the social credibility, the vanity metrics that people crave online, I really want to question why and how. Because some people that want social credibility, some people want it, but they don't want to do the stuff to get it. And some people get it, but haven't necessarily earned it. And earn is obviously very subjective. You can choose different ways to perceive that word, as it were. But some people, I'm going to use doctors because it's a very popular one. I'm not thinking about any one in specific, but doctors in general have a high social sort of like barrier, a line, as it were. If you're a doctor, you're immediately credible for whatever reason. And I've seen some doctors post some really outrageous claims, and it's awful because the science is just not there. And for those unfamiliar, there was a recent, I guess recent scandal. The Harvard doctor, well, the Harvard researcher that was faking data. She was caught faking data, and there was a big scandal. She's now no longer at Harvard publishing research, but researchers lie a lot. Researchers manipulate stats a lot, but they're given this credibility as being an expert, but there's no real, what I would class as, proof of that. There's no scrutiny, or there's limited scrutiny of that, and the peer review process is a whole process that needs to be challenged anyway. So the question then becomes, okay, how do you gain social credibility? And you look at the big social media profiles, and a lot of them have gained their credibility from people just liking them as people or liking the content they make. And one of the notes that I've put in our Obsidian is SSS Sniper Wolf. I don't know whether you're familiar with her content, but there was a video that came out very recently that essentially said her content is rubbish. It's a waste of time, and she's doing a harm to a lot of people because she does reaction content. She essentially looks at other people's TikToks, makes minimal effort in a reaction, like, oh, wow, and then just describes what she's seeing on screen, which isn't isn't valuable in any way. You can just look at it. Doesn't give credit to creators at all. Like she doesn't shout them out, doesn't call them out. Cuts out some of the usernames in some of the, or in a lot of the TikToks as well. She just rips videos from other people's channels, and she gets millions of views. She gets millions of dollars, but she's not actually
Wow.
doing anything. Yeah, she's not actually doing anything, not adding any value apart from collecting a lot of TikToks. But she's not even doing that. That's her team. All she does is watches a video, records herself going, "Wow, oh," and describe what's on screen, and gets millions for it. It's one way of earning money. Whether that's ethical or not is entirely up to you. But
It's kind of like the entire Reels TikTok space at the moment. It's like whenever I'm watching something on Facebook, whenever something pops up, it's someone else's face just going the entire time. For audio listeners, that would have been useless. I'm pulling a stupid face. And it's like I always make a habit of going to the original fucking video because I'm like, I don't want to see a stupid face. Even if you're laughing at it, just show me the original bloody video so I can look at that.
yeah, it's reaction content. I feel like is a way for people, or it's a hack people try and use to get money. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because everyone obviously wants money because money is the way the world works, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, unfortunately, depending on where you're coming from and views, perspectives, scenarios, situations, etc. But those people, SSS Sniper Wolf, has what I would class social credibility. If she was to say something or post something, there are a lot of people, young people, I will add, that will listen to her, that will take her view potentially. And when you extend this out to politics and what I would class as real world situations, Donald Trump is a perfect example of how he has social credibility from a lot of people. Whether that's for the right reasons or wrong reasons, obviously that's up to you and whatever political spectrum you're on and views that you hold. But he has that, whether you like it or not. And you could argue in the UK, Boris Johnson's very similar. The polarizing people. How they gain that? Ethical reasons, non-ethical reasons, etc., but they have social credibility. So how do you gain, or how do we gain social credibility? Because essentially that's what a lot of people want. They want impact, they want influence, they want to make a difference in the world. But how do you get your voice heard? How do you become this credible person on the internet? Because everyone's trying to do it.
Oversimplification.
That's one way of looking at it, yeah. But that's my worry.
Because that's like, yeah, that's where my, like, from my perspective, if I there's a part of me that would like the social clout because that would be really helpful, one, from a financial standpoint, and two, because I can actually make a damn difference, which is what I want to do. However, I don't think I want to play that game.
Mm-hmm. And it
Which
is a game. When you look at the creator industry,
it is a game. It's just a game. I don't want to roll the dice. I'd rather actually roll physical dice and play D&D and spend
I was
time
about
with
to
my
say
kids.
that.
And doing all of the other things that I want to actually do. Could I earn a heck of a lot more? Yes. Could I do a heck of a lot more to reach that? Yeah, sure. But that is at the sacrifice of other, and a lot of business is run by people who do not have anything but their business. A lot of the marketing is about business owners who do not have families, who do not have children, who do not have whatever, you know, mental social factors that influence. Like, they have the ability to just work themselves to the ground. I had an experience recently in my own business where everything just didn't quite go to plan, and the reaction that was given, not to reveal obviously too much, but was like, okay, cool, I realized that the affordances that I have now have changed, and that means that I need to switch what I'm doing, or allow it to emerge and work with that, versus trying to pretend it's not there and carry on doing what I'm doing before, and keep up these like weird expectations of output. My I need to be completely, my rate of exertion needs to be
Back
massive,
in.
and lots of things happening, and everything this, and output, and it's moving from like, actually, what do I want? I want my kids to be okay and happy, and to spend time with them as they're growing exceptionally flipping fast. And I want to, like, work for me is fine. I spent so much time focusing on work, but now I'm like, there are other things.
This is where I find it that the concepts of periodization is the one that I follow the most, because it's the one that I understand the most, and I think is applicable to everyone. I think it's what everyone does intuitively. It's just they don't have verbalizations of what it is. Some people use it as like energy, how they describe energy and feelings and motivation and all those sorts of things. At the end of the day, it's periodization. It's being able to maintain or push your energy levels in certain directions because of what your focus is on. And I've actually recorded. So when was it? I think it was Wednesday. So a few days ago, I recorded a day in my life, as it were, because I'm looking to do research with me videos. I put a poll out, and like 88% of people were like, yes, I want to see that. And my immediate reaction is, well, when I thought about it, was two things. One, when I think about credibility, how does showing my day give me credibility, or does it give me credibility? My initial answers were, well, it shows I'm doing the work. It shows I'm actually doing what I'm saying. It explains exactly how that I work. And it's also giving reasons to not necessarily listen to me, but reasons to believe that what it is that I'm saying is actually what it is that I'm doing. I'm not just saying this thing and then not doing it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Uh,
yeah,
but the other thing that was really interesting to me is when I initially thought about vlogging, this is like years ago, I was like, I don't have anything interesting to record. And when I did the recording, I had nothing interesting to record because my day is literally wake up, sit at computer, have lunch, sit at computer, take breaks, sit at computer, have dinner, sit at computer, go downstairs, watch TV, sit at computer, go to bed, do it again. Like I had to find different angles to time lapse myself sitting at the computer. And so where I think the value is going to come, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll edit it on Monday, is explaining how that works. What's going on in my day? But does that give me credibility? What does that explain? How does that help? What does it do? And I can't answer that. I won't know until I've put it out and people share their own thoughts, because we all have drastically different experiences, drastically different situations that we live in. And you explaining your situation right there made me think, okay, my periodization typically is split in 2-hour blocks. I have 2-hour blocks of work because as normally what I would class as a session, a practice session in my terminology. With you, your practice session, because your focus isn't research, my focus, my goal, as it were, is research. In the morning, your practice session is probably deal with kids. Then after that, it's probably do home stuff, like housework. Then the next practice session might be do some work so you have some money. Then it's dinner. Like, so your practice sessions can be the exact same as me, but the focus of the session be different, which means the I don't like using the framework, but the framework that I have, the periodization concept that I use, could be applied. So even though to me, I'm recording nothing that's useful, I might be recording a philosophy of practice
Yeah,
that's
and I
useful.
think this kind of, as you were talking, it kind of, one of the things I struggled with, especially at the beginning of our relationship, was like how much you were able to do, and
Mm,
everything you do, I'd love to do, and
mm,
I used to do, but I can't. Like the constraints that I have do not afford that anymore.
mm,
And so there was a period of actual, I'll call it what it is. It was loss because it felt like I'd lost that. And the last couple of months have been like figuring out what like that looks like, what the new system, what the new like thing was for me. A lot of it, it's really interesting as we talk about this of like, yeah, that idea that things have just shifted, because it used to be work was my sole focus because that's what we agreed. It was discussed with my partner. We both were happy with that and it felt good. But now that has shifted. And obviously change is not fun for anyone. Um,
Well,
and just
change is a constant, but when you have significant change,
yes, and it was significant change. And so trying to adapt to that and going, okay, cool. Am I wasting all this time doing X? No, I wanted to work on, I suppose, in my head, and I'm going to be documenting this in probably in a pop because I quite like that. And I was like, oh, good, that's helpful for me. But I'm blurring now, so this will change. Um, it's like the social aspect is one part of my, I suppose, overall system that has been such a low priority for a very long time. And that for me, I wish to change. And
mm,
so that's why it's become a higher focus. And at first, that was like, oh, that's bad. That's just fun. That's just X. I had an attachment to being like, this is wrong. I should be doing it all here. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Are we okay? Yes. Is this what I want to achieve? Yes. Am I doing what I want? Not all of it, but I'm an overly high achiever who wants to do everything all at once, all of the time. And the constraints I have do not afford that. So I have to like make those decisions. And one of the things that is in the course that I have is like people are like, well, what about when you don't want to do something or you don't want this? And it's like, don't do it. Like you're saying, and that is a simplification, obviously,
yeah.
but what you're saying is that's not actually a priority for you. And I'm like, interesting. Does
That's
it need to be a priority? Because that's the question I asked next. Does it need to be a priority right now in this event, in this thing, in these multiple events that are stacked? Does it need to be a priority? Is it priority right now? No.
so. This is what I'm currently working on conceptualizing inside of my pop, because periodization is the overall concept that I use to manage my life.
Yeah.
And inside of periodization, typically it's related to strength and conditioning, i.e., physical fitness. And when you look at different areas to focus on, they're called components of fitness, i.e., speed, strength, agility, all those sorts of things. But when you apply that to life, well, strength, it's not applicable. Speed, not really applicable. Power, all those sorts of things. But if you look at components of health, instead of components of fitness, well, now you have social, like how social you are. Then you have how intellectual you are, or how intellectual you want to be. So you've got social relationships, interpersonal relationships, your own ability to like intrapersonal, so reflection, your ability to reflect on things, your intellectual ability, your physical ability. So those traditional areas of what a healthy person is becomes your components of health. And when you look at periodization, again, traditionally periodization, you have blocks, mesocycles, macrocycles, microcycles, which could be a week, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, depending on what your goal is. Is your goal in 1 year to have a business that's a six-figure business? If it is, what components of health do you need to focus on? Well, social aspects, probably not drastically high. Intellectual ability, probably quite high, depending on the business you want to push. So your practice sessions, your daily practice sessions, will then be directed towards improving your intellectual ability, maybe your business ability. So those skills inside of the practice session will improve that component of health, which pushes towards your goal. However, if you have a different goal for the periodization program, then you're going to focus on different areas. So you're going to maintain certain components of health whilst challenging other components of health. But as with periodization, you can't just go, okay, I'm going to focus on business for an entire year, because then you'll burn out. And we know that. So you do what's called an active recovery. Instead of working high intensity on business for the whole mesocycle, you have intensity increases whilst maintaining other components, and then you have maybe a week for socializing, a week more focused on socializing, or you just have an active recovery. And those, yeah,
Literally what's happening right now. So kids been away, and literally I've spent nearly every single day running like D&D stuff because I'm really enjoying that. I love the storytelling aspect. It's not really something that's a priority in the business stuff because a lot of what I'm doing is very it's not as creative. It's very much tech, do the tech, get the tech done, it's set it up and make things work, and a little bit of coachy here and there, but it is very kind of light touch, which I'm not used to.
exactly. And that's
Which
why I
me,
find,
which is good, which is why what you were saying now, I'm like, yes, that's right. Business. I have been in a space of intense business building for I think the last 8 to 10 years and burnt out. And now that and now I'm in active recovery in my business, and I'm recovering from that. Not quite, but yes.
we can flesh out this.
I'm maintaining my business because that's how it feels. Like, as for me, I'm maintaining the business. That's literally it. I'm not pushing. I'm not doing everything. I'm not doing loads of things. I'm not firing stuff out all the time.
I wouldn't say that's maintaining, but again, this comes down to interpretation of the concepts we're talking about. But this is why I think the idea of constraints-led approach to coaching is applicable to life, not just sport. Because if we look at periodization as the overarching concept that we manage lives through, and we take microcycles as the component of health that we're focused on, then we look at the practice sessions, and inside those practice sessions we have an actual practice. Now we're looking at practice design. How do you design a practice? We're using the constraints-led approach to coaching, the constraints-led approach to developing a practice. We're through representative practice towards the overall goal. This is all in sports coaching literature, by the way. Yeah, he's sitting there nodding. Then you can apply these concepts, these principles, to every element of life, every component of health, which means that when you're working through struggles, when you're working through social credibility, working through Obsidian, working through anything that you want to do, you can apply those concepts, which is where the research is so, you had an aha moment. It's where the research is so sideways, but if you make the connection, which I made the connections years ago, for me, it brings so much mental clarity, so much freedom in the way that you work. And I would associate this to the ecological approach, that as an ecological learner, that's what I look at. But you don't have to believe in direct perception, and you don't have to believe in all of the things that the ecological approach push or suggest, but you can still apply the concepts.
So, the perfectionism thing that's in business of like, oh, you shouldn't be a perfectionist. Done is better than perfect. X is better than Y. You shouldn't spend all your time focusing on something. Why not? Was always my response. And it still is, because it's this high intensity, it's a practice. like when you mentioned high intensity, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what my week and a half is right now. It is a social high intensity thing that I'm doing, practice, because I wanted to improve my D&D and my general like dungeon master GMing skills, social interaction with other people, because I don't have too many people that I socially interact with. Bad, good, doesn't matter. That's just the reality. And I don't get much time to do that because family, other responsibilities, blah, 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 etc. And a lot of what I had was all tied to my work, which when I finish working with someone, that deteriorates and entropies over time. And so then I end up very alone. And then that didn't enjoy. And outside of that, I have my family and my kids who I see all the time. So I wanted to have that high intensity practice of socializing and doing stuff and all of that stuff. And that is quite cool. But everyone talks about like perfectionism and trying to be a perfectionist and oh, you done is better than perfect and you shouldn't be doing 120% all the time and but even that you shouldn't be working at 100% all the time. That assumes that there is a limit. 100% is the maximum, which is
And this is where, again, I want to bring it back to principles from sports coaching. And I don't understand why sports coaching is ridiculed um, because it's just not used, even though it makes sense. We work with high performance athletes. It's stupid. Anyway, when you look at maximum efforts, it's impossible. I'm going to repeat, it's impossible to do a maximum effort over a long period of time unless it's relatively maximum. When you
and then people go, oh, you burnt out because you stepped. No, I'm not burnt out. Because that's what's happening right now is I can feel I'm coming to the end of that rep as such. I don't know the
yeah,
terminology. I'm not a
oh,
sports
rep or
person.
set, yeah,
To the end of that rep set, and I'm like, cool, I'm chill. Oh, don't burn out. I'm not burnt out. I'm just enjoying it, and I'm coming to the end, and I can tell I'm coming to the end. So I'm cooling down, as it will, if we use the sports analogy. And it's like, no, okay, fair enough.
yes. That face was a reaction to something else, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like I'm starting to,
Recovery is more
recovery.
accurate
I'm
for me.
entering into recovery. I'm not burning out because I'm still going to be running D&D sessions. I just now have a high intensity input where I've done a lot of sessions with a lot of different people and learned a heck of a lot, which I'm going to start putting down in Obsidian as well. Not on my pop because that's really cool. I love that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to have loads of fun with that. And that will allow me to have that reflection in a period of, I mean, I don't think I ever stop reflecting. I'm constantly fucking doing it. Can't turn a bit off.
No one can.
So, no, and so that's quite exciting. Like I'm now ready to move into the next phase, which is perhaps a bit of business, a bit of family. And
This,
well, it's the summer holidays. So it's going to be with the kids. So there's going to be a high intensity stuff with the kids, and then it's going to be high intensity stuff with my business. And it's just so simple. It's just so simple,
yep,
and it's not oversimplified. It is simple
yes,
because it makes sense and it's natural. And I'm getting excited. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up now. Carry on.
it is exciting, isn't it?
It's exciting because it's so fucking stupid. It's
also,
just stupid. Anyway,
when you say high intensity, the analogy that I would like to use to bring some clarity into the sets and rep stuff is when you go to the gym, I'm going to use an obvious compound movement. So let's just say squat. When you go in,
yeah,
you could do a session and say, right, I'm going to improve my 1RM. So the most amount of weight you can lift in one rep, i.e. you go down, you go up. And in order to
yeah.
train that, you can train that in various different ways. But at the end of the day, you need to do a 1 rep max. And that is a maximum effort. But if you've done a maximum effort, it doesn't mean you can do a second one until you've taken a break for recovery.
So what I'm doing right now is setting my 1 rep max, basically. Sort
Yeah,
of.
using the analogy, yeah. And that's what, when I said, I can't remember what episode ago it was, but when I test something out, the first time I test
You
something
go
out,
ham. You go ham.
yeah,
I remember.
yeah,
Yes.
I'm like,
Oh, cool. So I
I'm
basically I love that.
You set your benchmark. You go, right, this is something completely new to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I'm learning, I'm learning a new chess opening, I'm going to learn this chess opening and I'm going to sit here for as long as I can and focus for as long as I can on this thing to give myself a rep max. Now, I don't then want to do a rep max the next 7 days in a row because that will lead to burnout. But I can then take, if I'm going to train by percentage, do a percentage of that. So let's cut back on the time that I do, or let's cut back on the amount of effort, perceived effort that I work at. So instead of a percentage, I'm looking at rate of perceived exertion. And then I can periodize my sessions, my practice sessions through the week. You're sitting there like buzzing.
I am, because this is just literally what I've been doing, and I had no idea I was doing it. It's great.
But it's what a lot of people intuitively do. And I think a lot of people do, once they've figured things out, this could help explain what it is that they do. But when they
Mm,
struggle, that's where the principles of periodization come in. But if you're not
mm.
familiar with why it worked or how it worked in the first place, you're not as confident in being able to correct it. Because
I love
if
this.
if you're not familiar with the rep maxes, if you're not familiar with training load, what your training load is, how to measure your training load, how you feel you're measuring training load, or anything
Because
like
the
that, then
instant reaction is this is only applicable in sport.
well, yeah. But I mean, even when you look at sport, so there's something called the female athlete triad, right? The female athlete triad is essentially where there are three different components. This is in research that impact
Yeah.
the female's ability to avoid burnout. And there are lots of different papers about this, and it has actually been more recently, I guess, renamed or rebranded as REDS, relative energy deficient syndrome. I found that out in my second year of uni and told the lecturer about it, and they didn't know about it, so we spoke about the female athlete triad instead, and now I'm quite comfortably going to call it REDS instead. But either way, what it essentially suggests is that there are different components or elements to how you avoid burnout, how you train to avoid burnout, how do you manage your energy, as it were, throughout the day. And that isn't solely reliant on sport, like how much you expend through sport. It's also social interactions, emotional interactions, and physical interactions, especially through childhood or adolescence in general as you develop, because obviously female athlete triad, as you can imagine, is related to female bodily functions. It changes throughout the month and throughout the years depending on how they develop. So how we develop and manage our energy is inside the sports research on a day-to-day basis, not just in sport, which means that
Yeah.
the sport-related research is still looking at the person as a whole. And especially when you look at managing fatigue um, before a session, an S&C coach is not going to go, right, you haven't trained this week, so you're going to be fully energetic. No, obviously they've been doing stuff. So you still need to measure their fatigue level. How do you measure their fatigue level? Yeah, in S&C, you can do like a CMJ or a counter movement jump or any other sort of force-related metric, really, as long as you have standardized metrics, but that's going into a whole other thing. So how you measure those things will change depending on what you're trying to measure and what data you have to compare against. But what we can do as people, which has been shown in psychology research a lot, is relative expenditure, like relative perceived expenditure, or using some sort of questionnaire to understand how we're feeling, because that's how we've evolved. We have evolved as organisms to feel and gauge what we can't do as easily. That's how animals or organisms that aren't as cognitively able as us can still, like when you look at sort of frogs, a frog still knows what it can and can't do. Like, why frogs? No idea.
That was a real like dog, cat, no, frog. I
Like,
love that one.
it's because the words on my screen are green, and I was just like green animal frog. um, but yeah. So when you think about a frog, when it's low in energy, will know that it's not going to be hopping around all over the place. It can recognize that. How does it recognize that? Well, it doesn't sit there and go, I'm going to do a survey in my head of all these different questions, give myself a score, calculate the act. No, it just feels that it doesn't have the energy to do it. Whether that feeling is accurate with the amount of stores it has, that's another conversation. but that right there is where I think the sports science research, the sports coaching research, and the educators research inside of managing periodization and managing energy, perceived energy, and the psychology and philosophy related in those conversations apply directly to every person's life. No, they're not in high performance sport, but they are functioning humans, and most functioning humans do not want to maintain their lives.
I love this. It's exciting. It's got to do with social credibility, man.
It sort of does. It sort of does, and I'm going to come up with some really bad relation, but
Go for it. I'm waiting.
Wait,
I'll leave you with that one. But it's really
think about
interesting.
the
Like,
ideas. Think
it's like,
about the actual ideas. How are sports coaching ideas credible? How are they like credibly seen in social media? Well, they're not, because they're just coaches. They just blow whistles and put codes on the floor. There's coaching science isn't a thing. Yes, it is.
yeah.
Coaching is easy. No, it's not. And that's where social credibility of what a coach means, the professionalization or lack of professionalization of the term coach, is impacted by society. Yes, I know. You can clap that one out. But yeah, it's related. You can relate anything. They're all, because when you look at what was it? It's not linear causality, it's multi-directional causality, I think, the terms used in the ecological approach. There are various causes, and you don't know exactly what the cause is, because linear causality is too oversimplified in the ecological approach. But yeah, so you could relate it. Whether it's a cause or not is another matter.
So good. So
Comments.
no.
Oh,
No.
okay. Sorry.
People who want to, okay, no, let's be real. I want to look at the research. Where do I go? What do I look for? Where do I start? I don't care if anyone else does.
Where do you want to start?
I would like the greatest amount of understanding on how to use it in my own life on periodization and everything we've spoken about today in the shortest amount of time. Cool, thanks. I'll go look up. How do you spell that?
PHAT.
Ah,
Yep,
cool.
So, serious answer, there isn't. Because all of the research,
Why
obviously,
am I not surprised?
because obviously all the research, because the way academia works, has to have a significant result, which means it needs to be tested in sport. So all of the research, very similar with the ecological approach and skill acquisition, is in sport, which is why it's so difficult to transfer the ideas into real life. So the I guess the best, the only option you have is to look into what periodization means, principles of, because there are different types of periodization. There's linear periodization, there's bilinear periodization, there's lateral and unilateral and unidimensional periodization, all changing, exactly, variations of how it can be applied. So just look at what is periodization and see if you can create some connections yourself. And the reason I say that is because what I'm saying now is the accumulation of 5+ years of research into this field applied in something that's drastically different from where the research was done. There are a lot of interpretations coming in here. So yeah, I would look into periodization as a concept in general.
It's in me
Yeah. You may need to specify periodization in strength and conditioning, because I think periodization is also a concept inside of biochemistry, I think. Like autopoiesis and things like that are related inside of organisms and how chemicals react.
Strength and conditioning coaching is S&C, yeah?
Yeah. Well, strength and conditioning is S, strength, and conditioning, C. So periodization in strength and conditioning, like S and C. Yeah. That would be where I would direct you first, but it will probably be very similar to when I directed you to Rob Gray and be like, hey, skill acquisition. You're like,
Cool.
Yeah. We're working on course stuff, but give me like a year. Maybe this is what the research of me vlogs will turn into. me explaining how this all works. But yeah, so comment section.
Comments of the week.
Yes, my first one is about time. And Dovas was talking about how time doesn't really have a definition. And I agree, because it depends on the person that's speaking about time and the narrative that's being used. But when they went into space time and things like that, I really got intrigued by how. So I think the last line is, so the question is, how much of this I got wrong because I don't really know much about it myself. So Dovas is saying that they don't really know how much they know about time. And I would agree. And my thought process went towards events, overlapping
Yeah,
events,
same.
multi-directional events that can create causes, because we can be in the same space, but be experiencing different environments, right?
Mm.
That's the difference. The ecological approach looks at environments. You can have two organisms in the exact same space, but in different environments. So let's take, I'm looking out into the garden. There is going to be a bird and probably some sort of woodlouse in there. They are in the same space. They're both in my garden, same space, but the bird is in a different environment. They are perceiving different affordances in that environment. They're looking at the bird feeder and going, food. The woodlouse is probably not even looking at the bird feeder because it's far too high, and they're probably looking at dirt underneath the rock or underneath the log that they're under, like those sorts
Or
of
looking
things.
at the bird going, shit, I'm going to be eaten.
Yeah, maybe. Uh, so the space may be the same, but the environments are different, and therefore the overlapping events are also different because of
Yeah.
the experience the organism has, the relationship they have. And when you look at time, yes, time is like space. It's a thing we all have, but it's relative to the organism environment relationship inside each individual event that occurs. I know that could sound very complicated for new listeners, but that's the way I see space and time. Is it's got to be relevant to the relationship between the organism and the environment.
So that same comment, I think.
Yeah, it's the fairly long one.
Yeah, I think I've got two on that. Um, time blindness, that popularization of time blindness.
First thing, what is it?
Exactly.
That would be my first question. When again, I'm trying to do a video about this, but it's difficult. When people say I'm time blind, they're not blind. Let's clear that up. They're not actually blind to it because they do experience it. What they struggle with is recalling specific pieces of information that they perceived throughout time, which is actually them saying, I didn't focus on anything in specific enough to remember at that point in time, which to me suggests that the environment didn't have pieces of information in it that that organism found useful, which means time blindness is something everyone experiences, because if it is redundant information, our brain will forget it. If you don't use it, you lose it. So time blindness isn't specific to one person. So time blindness is an experience everyone has. Okay, that's how I would explain the experience of time blindness. What about you?
It is that I think that is the best, like, I experience and have defined it as time blindness. To me, when I mention it's like I look at a date, as one specific example. I look at a date and I don't really know how far away that is. Like, I can't.
What do you mean by you don't know how far away that is?
So I cannot.
Are
So
you?
let's say something's happening. So let's say something's happening on the 3rd of August.
Mhm.
If I am not specific, if I'm just looking at it and just go, oh, this 3rd of August, I perceive that as a month away,
Right. Okay.
even though it's not.
So
But that is I perceive it as a month away unless I attune to that. I am aware, I have an awareness of that often the expertise that I have in the way that I work, the reflection that I have is I see that as a month away. If I attune to it, then it's like, hang on a minute, that is that a month away? I have a sense that something's not quite right. So I open a
That's
calendar.
that's the relationship, though. That's the relationship between you and the environment. In the environment, the
Yes.
information you have is the date. What I did when you said 3rd of August is I actively perceived in the environment, okay, what's the date today? Because if I don't know what the date is today, I don't have any reference information. So 3rd of August, to me, again, was about a month away until I looked over. And as I'm acting, I'm perceiving the date today is the 29th,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
3rd of August. Oh, okay. So time blindness is when you have a snapshot of information, but we don't
Yeah.
perceive
I
in a
was getting
snapshot.
there. Yeah, exactly. It's when I'm not attuned. And I agree. What you said was exactly like the explanation of what I'm experience of my experience. That is how I see time blindness. So if I can afford how many days, my skills in maths are mental
Limited.
maths is not limited. I do not have expertise in mental maths, whereas I think you have quite strong expertise in mental maths. At least that's my perception,
It's
anyway.
it's a skill I've developed over time, yes.
Yeah. Whereas I
Which
do not have
I
that.
think everyone has that skill, or has
Yeah.
the potential to learn that skill.
Yeah.
It's just whether they actually
Mm.
focused on developing that skill or not.
Yeah.
I didn't
That was
deliberately focus on it. It's just
yeah. Yeah. I did not deliberately focus on it and haven't focused on it. But I know that I can just press a button and go week. Okay, cool. It's not this week. Oh, it's then. Cool. And then I associate it with an event in my calendar. Ah, cool. That's the day the kids coming back. And that's why that was the date I chose. And then I'm able to connect it to the events. And I'm like, okay, cool. I've got X amount of time. All right, cool. Now I know what's happening. If I am not attuned to, I suppose attunement is, if I'm not attuned to that in the environment, then that's when time blindness occurs. But with that assumption, as you said, everyone experiences that. That's not a unique experience. We all get lost in what we're doing
mhm,
because we're our focus is attuned into what we're actually bloody doing.
mhm. It's attention. Where is your
Yeah.
attention? If your attention is not on information that is relevant to you perceiving how far away something is, then you need to refocus. You need to pay
Mm.
attention to other pieces of information. So your action changes as you perceive, and so you can then cognitively understand what it is. If someone's, it's the same as when you look at your phone and someone says, hey, do you have any messages on your phone? You open up your phone, no messages, and then you close your phone, and then they say, okay, now what's the time? And you go, I don't know. And you have to open up the phone again. But they say, yeah, but you saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it, but
But I didn't perceive it.
you did perceive it.
Oh
You
yeah, I
did,
didn't I?
yeah, you did perceive it. You didn't attune
Tune
your
it.
focus. You didn't attune your
Yes.
focus to it. So it's information available, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's an affordance that you've perceived.
I just love how it actually explains stuff.
It's the same when you have a novice learner and an expert learner doing a skill.
Mm.
They perceive the same information, but they don't perceive the same affordances because of the one, the intention the individual has in that environment, and two, the expertise they have in the skills and developing the information they have and the sensitivity they have. Some people will be more sensitive to the time because of various reasons. Maybe they need to leave early, so when they open their phone, they do a quick check of the time. Oh yeah, we're still good. Then they look at the messages, so their sensitivity is increased because of whatever situation they have with the relationship and the environment.
And that is kind of like that sheet attractor thing that Julia was talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. They have an attraction to certain pieces of information in the environment because of their relationship to it. Some people have a wider, a deeper attractor in some situations over other situations, and that's where I don't think time blindness I don't think time blindness is a thing that is unique to any specific person. I think time blindness is an inherent experience of where our focus lies.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one. My
Yeah.
next comment, because I think you covered your comment while we went through mine. So since we can't handle boredom,
What?
handling boredom is something related to it was a longer comment, but that's what I wanted to take from it. Because we can't handle boredom, we need to do something else. What they were saying is when they have a task that they can do really quickly, but they're told to do it over a long period of time, they feel like it's more effort, right? So they feel like doing this one thing over a long period of time is more effortful, more draining than just doing lots of things at once or lots of things over that period of time that they could do. And that's because we can't handle boredom. I think there is a difference between doing something over a long period of time or a longer period of time than you see necessary and handling boredom. Because
Mm.
if you do something, but you know you could do it faster and you're deliberately doing it slower, however you define that, then your attention is being taken, but you have a lot of surplus attention, right? But you can't use all of that surplus attention because you're meant to be doing something else, unless you do multiple things at once. Multitasking. No, you can't multitask. Yes, you can. It depends on how you define task. So I don't think the struggle there is, oh, doing the slow task. I think the struggle there is doing the slow task with the restriction of what else you can do at the same time.
Mm.
And when it comes to handling boredom, the way I perceive that is boredom is not being given a specific task to do and you being asked to do something yourself. Which which is a bit different. Because I would say I'm never bored. I'm never bored, as it were, because I'm
Mm.
always active. I'm always actively doing something. Even if I sit and meditate, am I bored when I'm meditating? No. So when are you bored? And that then begs the question for me, what is boredom as a relative term? I am more bored now than I was before we started recording because I'm putting less effort into the conversation than when I was researching. But am I bored? No. But I am less bored than I was before the conversation. That's not saying
Mm.
this conversation is bad. In fact, I would say this conversation is good because it's less effort, however you define that, but it's more effort in another way.
Mm.
So bored then becomes this word that doesn't really mean much unless you add or attach emotional meaning to it, which then brings in these components of health.
Mm.
Again, bringing us back to periodization. Like, what is boredom? Well, it's recovery. Well, if it's not active recovery, then it's passive recovery. Is passive recovery fun? No. So what do you do in passive recovery to make it fun? Well, you add maintenance information of other components of health. What does that mean? Oh, I'm going to focus on one thing and just think about that for a certain amount of time. Well, now you're maintaining your focus through meditation. it all connects. It all just works to me. But that's how I would address that. What about you?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I mean, my comment was the first part, but I had an understanding and the realization that everything can be exhausting, even waiting on working slower than etc. etc. Um, yeah, and it's just the thing that I kind of called out to me was like that our relationship to it's that relationship to time again. So
Mm,
thinking about our relationship to time, or more specifically, our perception of that as well, and how we perceive time. There's something that um I once a long time ago started writing a game that was around like time being against us. It's the movie About Time stole it 'cause it's totally my idea first, and obviously I had that idea way before everybody else. Have you
have
seen
you?
the film About Time?
Oh, is it called About Time?
I think it is called About Time. Yeah.
I don't think so. When you said the movie About Time, I was like, which one? There's loads.
It's not that one. Okay. I can't remember what it's called now. But there is a movie where basically you pay for things with time. Like you have this thing on you.
Oh, okay,
It's
yes,
got
I have seen a couple like that.
I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's got Justin Timberlake in it. That's what I remember.
Yeah, but this is the process of remembering. You're remembering different elements involved in the movie, and
And it's like the perception of time being for and against us, but is it not? Is it meh? Meh? That doesn't sound like the right question, but it's often where we're going. It's like, oh, time is against us. Yeah, but is it?
that term, that statement there, is one
Yeah.
that I really don't like. Because
Mm,
time can't be against or for anything because it exists. It just exists. It's a
yeah.
constant.
Yeah.
So it can't be for or against you. It's an emotional response that you have added with your interpretation of what the word
Yeah.
means. It's the same as saying, "Oh, that person annoyed me." No, they didn't. They'd said something, and you got annoyed at that person.
Yeah.
It's drastically different, which is why I don't get triggered, frustrated, angry very often. I think the only real times I get well, the last time I got angry was I was like, what, year 4? So how old am I? 8, 7, 8, something like that. It's the last time I remember really getting angry. I felt other emotions that I couldn't control, but angry, very, very rare. So
Mm.
yeah, because I learned very quickly to control my anger, my emotions of anger, because of certain consequences when I did get angry. But yeah, so I feel like those
You
sorts
are
of
alarmingly chill.
sorry.
You are alarmingly chill. Well, you're not. No, chill's the wrong word because you're not chill because you're bouncing all the time. But like after spending, I can't remember how many days with you, but like you're just like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's good. I'm like, this is so very different to my life. It's
I,
great. That's great.
can you give some specific examples? Because I must admit, when we met up in Germany, it to me it came across as you were very vigilant and very, what came across to me, worried about a lot of things that to
Oh
me
yeah,
I hadn't even considered worries.
yeah, yeah. That is my default status of worry.
Can you give some practical examples? I'm intrigued. You just came across very, how do I put this? I'm not going to sugarcoat it because it's not me, but
Oh yeah,
I
no,
can't find an accurate word. Jumpy isn't accurate,
but that's close.
but
Yes,
yeah,
anxious.
yeah, it still doesn't encompass it well, but
It's
yeah.
not. Yeah, no, I am very much like yes. I can't even explain why. It just
Over, overly caring, I guess. You were overly
yes,
caring of everything everyone else
everything.
was doing.
Yes,
Yeah, it was just
yes.
really odd to experience because most of the people that I had, well, physically when I'm like around people, like football, do whatever. It doesn't matter. If you make a mistake, so what? If you fall over, so what? And people take the mick out of people all the time. Trampoline, same sorts of things.
Mm,
Yes, there were people in that environment that were very vigilant and very caring about what other people thought, but the guys that I trained with, literally guys as in like male people that I trained with, did not care. Like you got on a trampoline, you messed about. I don't know how to do this skill. Okay, I'll push in the mat, you fling yourself around, we'll see what happens. Okay, cool. It was very much whatever, sure, let's do it. Let's give it a go. I've never
yeah, it
done
was
a
really
football before.
interesting
Let's
the
just
the
throw it.
difference. Like because my like in the environment that I'm in, it is very much care, figure out, find solutions. I am the solution finder, and so I need to be vigilant of everything and try to predict everything. That is my perception of like I must be vigilant, I must predict, I must figure out, I must understand before anybody else and get there quickly.
Hmm. I do think it's a skill that I've learned because no one else in my family is as chill as I am. When there is a discussion that's heating up or an argument that's going on, I there's no reason for me to raise my voice. I don't need to get emotional or frustrated or anything like that. I just talk. Which is why I think I struggle with online interactions sometimes, because I take the words at face value because that's what I think you should do when you see words. Adding tone in or trying to interpret tone through
Yeah,
words is just poor practice because you have no idea what the other person is intending. So if you don't
that's why if
say,
anyone ever receives a message from me, it's a very long message, especially if it's someone I don't know, because they've
I say
tried
what I
to.
mean. And when people say, oh, but did you mean this? No, because that's not what I said.
Mm. Yeah, so for me, that's like the exact opposite for me. I want to ensure that exactly what I said, and I know it's a load of crap, and people will take whatever they want from it. I know that.
You're one of those people that will sit there for like hours writing out like the smallest couple of sentences to make sure there's no potential misinterpretation. Yeah.
I Yes, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah, no, I don't get me wrong. I take my time responding to some messages when I know it's going to be scrutinized, but it's still just I'm just going to
Why don't
use
you
the
think I know
words.
great content?
Yeah, I just still use the words that I think are appropriate to me at the time. And then if people do decide, oh no, that's the wrong word, I will then question it. Go, okay, what word would you have used there? Then I understand the reasoning behind it. And if they don't want to probe those questions, then that's their problem.
And linking back to what we were talking about, that's why like my focus has been so hard on like the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, the social aspects, because I realized a lot of my relationships are like that. And then with my experience with you, where you were just chill as fuck, it was so frustrating. And you're like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, but yeah, all these things that I care about and worry about.
It's
And it wasn't actually to clarify. I don't think it was. I didn't even care about them. I just felt I should.
mm. The way I would describe this, if you were to look from the outside, is if there was a decision to be made, I would make a decision, think about it a couple of seconds, and then go. And before going, it almost felt like you needed to do like all these different decision calculations before making an action. That's how it felt like to me. So like, no,
Yeah.
we can't do that yet because we need to think about all these different things first to make sure that nothing can go wrong. And it was just no, we just go. I mean, even walking to the university, like right, we need to get the map out. We need to do this. We need to, and I'm like, which way is it? It's that way. Okay, let's start walking. Yeah, but wait, no, it's just walk.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It was those sorts of experiences. But yeah, and I think that comes from I think anyway that comes from me just acting and perceiving as you go.
Yeah.
Emotions
And
can't
it was
be
something that I
added in.
noticed that I'm now trying to, because it's fucking exhausting. And that's what I'm actively kind of figuring out. And being in different environments afford different things. And the stuff that I'm doing now is very, very different. It's like everyone's fine, everyone's chill. It's thinking on the fly. Literally, being a GM, a game master, is thinking on the fly. I'm also very good at thinking on the fly, but I would rather not think on the fly and predict and plan everything. But I'm slowly just like not, because that's where I want to get. I think I will always plan a lot, but I'm slowly.
Oh, I mean, I plan a lot. Just once I've planned it, that's it. I'm done. I'm
You
not
go.
gonna. Yeah. um. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, carrying on. This is so fun. I love this.
Yeah. Uh, Next comment was about knowledge is processed perception. And when I first read that, I didn't like it. And now I'm reading it again. I still don't like it because knowledge is processed perception. I don't think you can.
Mm,
I don't think you can add that in unless you're assuming indirect perception, which Davos is familiar. I don't personally follow. So knowledge
mm,
is process perception. I don't agree with. And when we look at perception, perception is knowledge. You gain knowledge through perceiving. So it's not a noun, as it were. It's not, this is the knowledge that I've gained through this this event of perception. No, you gain knowledge as you perceive through action. Whether you choose to use that knowledge or attune your focus and actually you use the information, the knowledge that you've gained from action in your own behavior is another question. And I think we do most of the time, because you could argue that affordance is your action towards the perceived knowledge that you've gained through action. And the example that Dovas was using was see a clock more than once. So you can see a clock. You again, using the phone, you have to see the clock more than once to actually attune or focus to it. But I think we've covered this before, like early in the conversation.
If I'm looking at the time, I look at the time.
Yeah.
I attune immediately to the time, which is something that I do a lot. That's Danny figured out.
But this is something that I was exploring yesterday in a conversation with Vera, because I was talking to Vera about like seeing and perceiving as different terms, and I got to thinking about how when you look at the time and then you look away from the time, sometimes you forget what that time was in a couple of seconds, because you looked at the time, you were thinking about the time, then you saw something else, your focus went elsewhere, and then you've forgotten what the time was.
Yeah.
Can you then remember what the time was without looking at your phone? Now, I would argue yes. But in order to remember that, you now have to go through the process of remembering that experience.
Mm.
But remembering that experience takes more effort than turning on the phone again. So I don't think that's, oh, you've forgotten it. No, I think it's not focused at the moment, and to bring it into focus requires more effort than turning on the phone again.
Yeah.
That's the difference to me, which I think can
agree.
change the way people look at phones in schools. But that's a
Oh,
video
yes,
I'm
I
working
know.
on right now.
I was looking at that, I'm like, oh, yes.
Wait, which one you were looking at? Were you looking at the script or were you looking at the research file?
A research file.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. All right. Drinking coffee. What are you talking about drinking coffee for?
So this is what Don was. I find that the easiest way to manage your energy is not to drink caffeine after 8 a.m. I was like, there's an assumption that caffeine, like, because it's interesting. I'm thinking about my other half, who can drink coffee at stupid o'clock in the morning and then immediately go to sleep. I'm like, how?
There is a lot to be said about that. The things I want to emphasize is, one, not all sleep is the same. Right?
Yes, that's true.
So the quality of sleep that someone gets when they are under the influence of the drug caffeine, I want to emphasize that it is a drug. It's a performance enhancing drug, legally a legal one. There are limitations to caffeine. So some people, when they take the drug, will react. Well, everyone will react in the same way when it comes to like the chemical imbalance, but how the behaviors are changed and what the chemical imbalance changes will depend on how their body reacts to it, of course. So the extent to which someone's, I'm not going to get into the neurochemicals and blah, 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 because listen to an Andrew Huberman episode. Yeah, he'll go into it for like 2 hours. There you go. But you can feel tired. You can feel sleepy, and you can go to sleep having just consumed caffeine. But the quality of sleep is lower because your brain is still active, chemically active. So the effects of sleep are reduced. However, some people feel tired, but their brain is active enough that they can't fall asleep as easily. And that's because their brain chemically reacts either more more intensely or less intensely, depending on the individual. So their behavior is changed in a different way, which is why some people can have caffeine, fall asleep, but their sleep quality is lower. And other people, when they have caffeine, just really struggle to fall asleep. I personally don't consume caffeine at all, like zero. Some days I can fall asleep straight away. Well, I say straight away in like 10, 20 minutes. Other days, it takes me 2, 3 hours to fall asleep. And I'm not exaggerating. I can put my head on the pillow at 11:30, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, my brain is still spinning. I'm still thinking about loads of
Your
different
brain.
things. Yes, I know. That's why I corrected it. I'm still thinking about loads of different things because my brain technically is spinning because it is part of cognition. Yeah. But yeah, I did refocus my sentence there. But yeah, I'm still thinking a lot at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's not because of caffeine. That's not because of a lack of or surplus of. It's because of the environment that I've put myself in. When I started thinking, the relationship between myself and that environment, me laying down in bed, becomes more interesting. So I follow the thinking, I follow the thoughts. How do you then change that environment? Well, by literally changing the environment. Either get out of bed or take the information out from the embodied thinking and externalize it into your phone, etc., etc.
But you shouldn't have your phone by your bed. It will keep you awake.
Shut up. Like I feel like the research for me videos are going to be me going, yeah, you know that productivity thing you meant to do? I don't do it. You know the self-help thing you meant to do? I don't do it.
I think we'll probably put this into an episode itself because there's something I was seeing today about how video games are terrible and awful, and you're gonna suffer, and you're gonna and I'm just like,
I got an article coming out on
fuck
that.
off, just fuck off.
So
No.
some of the research I've been reading about phones and technology, one of them argued that people are addicted to gaming and it's negative for their studying, and they likened Fortnite, right, to drugs and addictive behaviors.
Oh, fuck me, seriously.
And you know what I thought of? What about sport? What about those that play sport?
You're
Those,
addicted to sport. It's a drug.
but I'm like, when
You're
you look,
addicted to work. It's a drug.
when
Yeah, you enjoy
when you
something.
look at the
Don't do
kids.
it.
But when you look at the kids that are playing academy football, they are playing academy football, physically demanding football, about the same amount of hours as kids play Fortnite, right? Maybe a little bit, yeah, maybe a little bit less, but the physical demand is higher. If someone plays Fortnite, yes, they're looking at a screen. If someone plays football, that's risk of injury. And we know those that play sport have physical injuries later on in life because of the amount of exposure to force their body has had under them. My back hurts sometimes because of the amount of force it went through when I trained in trampoline. My knees hurt. Like, I need to do maintenance work, cycle, walking, so that I don't hurt. It's not that, oh yeah, I want to walk every, well, yes, I do want to walk every day, but I don't walk every day just because, oh yeah, that sounds like a fun
Oh, you
idea.
definitely fucking walk.
I do enjoy activity. I do enjoy walking and cycling and other stuff. But it's not like I wake up and go, right, I need to walk right now.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But you're addicted to walking then.
Okay. Sorry.
It's so stupid. I read it. I think it was
I
I don't know what
think
it's called,
I think
Notion
it,
Dad or someone, but
yeah,
it's just
I got the
he
same article.
shared it was just like, this is a load of shit. And I'm like, yes, it is a load of shit.
I clipped that one, and that's one that I'm going to make an article about.
Because it
Subscribe
is
to
a
my
load of
Substack.
shit. Yeah, it's fucking stupid. It's dumb. It's such an oversimplification.
But that's where I think the people that don't understand the environment are the problem. And it's one of the arguments that I'm probably going to make at some point inside of the banning phones in schools. It's it's something parents, teachers just don't grasp.
This
They
is
don't.
just interesting because that my relate. I'm thinking about. I'm just reflecting on like my relationship with my kids and their technology devices,
Mm,
and it's making me question the assumptions that I'm having. about them being on technology,
What do you mean?
or like limiting how much technology they go on, because I know what he's doing, and he's learning about absolutely flipping everything. He told me the other day. My son told me, he was like, "I'm watching a video of, does Santa Claus actually exist? Scientific evidence for Santa." And I'm like, that is nerdy as and I love it. And now I'm going to go find that video you're watching and go watch it myself, because that's what a fascinating question.
That right there is what I think teachers inside of education right now don't understand, because a lot of adults that are teaching don't understand technology well enough to use it themselves. They don't think
Oh my
it's
God, as a
it can be
parent,
used.
as
I
a
mean,
fucking parent.
parents,
Oh,
it's the same. It's so frustrating. And again, this is going to be coming out in the video, but the the arguments they make are so
shit.
shallow. Yeah,
Shit.
they're shit, but they're so shallow, and the science doesn't even support them. It's funny.
It's like, oh, you shouldn't be on your phones for too long. You shouldn't be on your devices. And I'm like, oh, I am.
I think this relates to my last comment actually about sensory overwhelm, too much information. They essentially were saying that sensory overwhelm is too much information, and they need to be able to constrain the environment, right? They need to be able to constrain all the information that they have, so that they can focus on whatever it is. And that, I think, is phones. Phones have the potential to be overwhelm. There is the potential of overwhelm. Yes.
Mm.
How do you manage that? Well, you develop the skill to manage the amount of information on your phone. How do you develop that skill? You don't give them the phone. How is that managing their skill or helping them develop that skill? That's just not giving them the opportunity to develop the skill at all.
Mm.
So how is banning it doing that? That's not helping them develop. That's stopping them from develop. So if anything, you're doing more harm, because then when they do have access to their phone, they have no understanding of how to manage that. So a ban to me makes no sense in that aspect, because they're not learning to manage all the information there. So what could teachers do instead of banning the phone? Well, how could you use the phone? Can you use your phone to learn this topic, learn that topic, talk with other people in the classroom? Maybe, I mean, I'm putting it out here, but maybe when you have a school and you have a classroom of 25 kids, but inside that classroom of 25 kids, you have the entire year group doing the same lesson. Maybe, just maybe, instead of having 25 kids being taught by one teacher, you have the entire year group talking about the topic on social media. So the entire year group are talking about the topic and exploring the topic ideas. And then the teacher can foster different information, different use cases, different conversations inside the class. So while inside the classroom, you're talking about something, someone else that isn't interested in that conversation could be talking in another classroom about something they do care about. And instead of them being distracted by social media, they're now focused on the lesson, just a different part of the same lesson.
Mm.
That to me is much more beneficial than I'm going to doodle on my piece of paper because this is boring, or I'm going to stare out the window because that's more exciting than this because this is boring, or I really want to talk to my friend, so I'm not going to focus on what they're talking about. I'm going to think about what I'm going to say to my friend when I can talk to them. Ah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of banning the opportunity to learn, constrain the practice environment. Yeah, use the tools that we have. Don't stop them from being an opportunity. But hey, that's my view.
Yeah, I agree.
Got anything
So
else?
it's just a reflection of like how I'm thinking of my kids' relationship with technology, their use of technology, restricting that use of technology, how actual beneficial that it really is because it's not, and then how to create that environment for them to that
Scenario for
my
you.
mm,
Scenario for you. You get a report from a teacher saying Aidan was distracted in lesson because he was on his phone. And the teacher says they want you to put some restrictions on his phone use, lock it away in the locker or put it in the bag or not take it to school at all. What's your initial response?
My instant response pre this conversation would be to do that. But now I'm like, yeah, but what was he looking up? So what was actually happening? So what was he looking at? Because if you're not providing him with the environment, then it's you that has
The
an
problem.
issue here. But obviously the constraints of teaching, etc., school systems, load of shit, etc. But yeah, like after this conversation, I'm having a slightly like
Yeah.
moment of like,
But that's the
interesting.
same reaction that I would have. I would ask, okay, so what were they doing? Because if they were looking up information about the lesson, then actually it's beneficial. If they were looking up information about a previous lesson, again, I would still argue that's beneficial. And if they're not interested in your lesson, but interested in learning something else, why is that a problem to them? Isn't that a problem to you as the teacher because you haven't made the topic interesting enough? Because if they're not on their phone, I assume their argument is that they're not on their phone, they will listen to you. Is that really accurate? If someone doesn't have access to their phone and you're talking about something they're not interested in, does that mean they're going to pay attention to you? No, we know that. we know that, which is why teachers say it's really hard to keep everyone's attention in class because it's hard to keep 25 to 30 people's attention. Yeah, because your teaching isn't conducive and isn't differentiated to every person in that environment. So how do you make a lesson environmentally friendly for everyone? Giving them the affordances, the opportunities for behavior to help them learn about the topic you want them to learn about. Phones.
So here's where my thought process is going.
Yep.
So little boy, he is on YouTube learning anything he possibly can about lots of different things, whether that be something to do in Minecraft or whether that be other stuff. Whereas my daughter is watching Netflix, watching, and so like my instant reaction to that is, oh, constrain Netflix, and then I am immediately going, I have assumed that entertainment is not learning. And then I'm like, and I don't agree with that, which has got me going, oh, this is interesting. So what is she learning or discovering through that environment of watching? Like, yeah, I think it's a DC Supergirls at the moment that she's what, and I'm like, well, it's creativity, it's color, it's like all the, and I'm like, oh, well, shit.
And something when we bring into entertainment, what is entertainment built on? Society, interactions with society. So, how can you relate Netflix with history, for example, or geography, for example? Okay, you in this lesson, you're going to watch this Netflix film series, and it's based in America, The Office. Now you're going to watch this Netflix series that was based in the UK, Monty Python. How are the
Sorry.
How are the cultures different? Geography. What things are in the environment? Well, Monty Python in history, there were different laws. Oh, I didn't know you could smoke in pubs. Oh, you could back then, but you can't now. Why is that? Now you've got history in there. You've also got cultures in there. You've got society in there. You've got law. You've got politics. All inside of we're going to watch Netflix. We're going to watch films. So the kids can watch these things. So you're using technology and you're using the environments that they're already learning in and teaching them how to learn a topic, a concept, through the exposure of information that they get online anyway. So what I would argue that's doing is giving them the skill to use opportunities to practice outside of school. When they're watching something at home on Netflix with their family, or when they're watching TV around their friend's house, they can have discussions and arguments and conversations about what they see in those like they do in school.
Yeah.
If, for example, you're watching, I don't know, The Big Bang Theory, and you see whatever interactions going on, and you're like, well, that's not nice. Why isn't that nice? Well, she shouldn't have bullied him. That's not bullying. It's not this. It's not that. Oh, yeah, but he's smart. Yeah, but is he smart? Because he didn't have evidence on that. Now we're talking about real world issues. We're talking about critical thinking whilst watching Big Bang Theory.
Mm.
That to me is beneficial because you're teaching kids the skill of learning through the environments afforded to us through the internet. And you're not going to escape the internet. You can't just ban the internet from everyone.
It's not going to work.
No, we need to develop the skills that we want students to have, i.e. critical thinking, etc., etc. And the only way you're going to do that is by constraining the environment, the practice environment that they are in to develop those skills. How do you do that? In school. Give them the opportunities to do that, to learn those skills. If the student does decide, actually, you know what, I'm going to go on my phone and I'm going to talk to my friends instead. Okay, you see the behavior is moving away from what you expect. How do you deal with that? Do you punish? You can't use your phone. Or do you ask them questions? Why are you on your phone? Well, this is boring. Okay, why is it boring? Well, I already know this. Okay, so now their task, their goal, isn't related to them. So that's not the problem with their phone being a distraction. The problem is the task being set is too simple. So the teacher then needs to set a different task. That's not a person problem. That's not a phone problem. That's a learning environment problem.
So cool.
But that's differentiated learning. That's person-centered learning. That's student-centered learning. That's the learning that I was taught at first year undergraduate sports coaching degree. That's what most teachers are taught. But the environment that they teach in, because of the constraints of the system that they're under, doesn't afford that to them. I mean, one of the reasons is because a lot of teachers aren't told this information and they're given so much other work that I would argue is redundant, that they don't have the knowledge or understanding or experience in practice to do this sort of thing. But yeah, that's a long conversation that I'm more than happy to dive into at another point.
Yeah, we should do an episode on that one because that's a lot of what in terms of how my thought process is for my kids, and obviously they're going into higher education now. Sorry, not higher education. They are at the age of 11 when they go into the next stage of school.
Yeah, they're 11 going into secondary schools. Yeah.
I can't say secondary schools.
Would know, but those in the UK will be familiar. Those in the US will associate, I assume, middle school with secondary school, which is somewhat accurate enough. So yeah, the age is the easiest one. So internet in schools. That's the podcast episode that I've just added. Right. Cool. Thanks everyone for listening.
Bye.
Talk to you next week.